to The Full Experience, a show that breaks down television series like a, oh gosh, now I can't think of the metaphor that I was trying to think of. You know, the medical thing that slices up your head and shows you images of it.
Yes, it's a vivisection of your favorite
It's like a vivisection of your favorite TV shows. We watch the first, ultimate, lowest, and last of a TV show to get a sense of its broad spectrum. The first episode, of course, the last episode gives us the front and back. The ultimate is the highest rated. The lowest is the lowest rated. So we see it at its best, we see it at its worst, and we are kicking off a new watch of MASH with season 1, episode 1, Pilot, which first aired September 17th, 1972. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Hey, man, can I tell you my favorite part of MASH episode 1? It was when I clicked play and saw it was only 27 minutes long. For some reason, I thought it was an hour-long show.
No, because it's a half-hour sitcom.
Well, because, and that is something I want to explore. I didn't mean for this to be the first thing out of the gates, but it's really interesting how hard this very first episode goes out of its way to both emphasize how serious the situation they're in is for dramatic tension, I guess, but also it's so cartoonish and over the top with the vaudeville style bits that they do that they have to establish the rules of like, no. This is honeymooners time. This is Fred and Wilma 10 years before or whatever. Like it's the clownish sexism, the fact that like the moment that they drug Frank and put him into a coma, they medically induce him into a coma and keep him there because they don't like his face. It's like, okay, I get the rules. They can never be kicked out of the unit for anything at all. There will be no repercussions because they're just too talented and good. They're shielded. Nobody will suffer any ill effects. Do not waste any time being worried for any of the core cast.
It's a really interesting history here that I was such a big MASH fan in high school that I went down the rabbit hole a million times. So I'm pulling from memory, not from research. But Richard Hooker wrote the book MASH based on his actual experience in the Korean War. And it was a comedic exaggeration of his experience, kind of in the tradition of Evelyn Waugh or one of those kind of comedic, serious/comedic British writers, except he was American. It was turned into a movie that was a little more of a dramatization, but also comedic. And so slightly more exaggerated of his actual experience. But I think if I remember right, Richard Hooker thought the movie was fine. It made some compromises that maybe he didn't love, but mostly represented his viewpoint somewhat. This episode that we just watched is a 30-minute 1970s sitcom distillation of the movie. So it is like so far removed from Richard Hooker's actual, like, this is pretty close to what happened, but I exaggerated some stuff for dramatic effect, that it probably bears no relation to his actual experiences, but it's like a funhouse mirror of that. So I always look at it and compare it to the when I see the pilot, I always compare it to the movie because they're very much trying to hit a bunch of the movie's plot points in a half hour, which means that you never spend the depth with them that you did in the movie. Also, while they used the same theme song from the movie without the words, they added a laugh track, which really does change the tenor of things as well.
Well, and could you imagine it without that laugh track? Because only in the 21st century have we really seen serious comedies like The Office and Arrested Development eschew that social proof of the laugh track. If you didn't know they're making a joke, then all of a sudden it's like, why are these people just awful? And why are they saying and doing that? It's like you need, like, otherwise you just have dramatic tension followed by awkwardness, and then dramatic tension followed by awkwardness.
And I can't tell, to your point about the misogyny, I can't tell how much of that is we know it's misogynistic, but we're trying to represent the reality of people being misogynistic in the 50s in Korea, and how much of it is just it's 1972. That's the way the world is right then. And
I actually think that the mere inclusion of women in officer roles or what have you is progressive, and also this is a time, this would be peak. I forget if it's second wave feminism, where it's important that everybody know that these women have agency, and even the girl Dish, it's she's on the fence and she'll choose on her own dang time whether or not she decides to cheat on her husband while away at war, or fiance.
Yeah.
And so as a result, strangely, even all that grabbing and that read to me as a form of sexual empowerment that maybe is only possible. This is from the perspective of 1973, looking back on 1950, that would only be possible in a wartime situation. No,
that's interesting, because I think the way people who see it now will read it is these men are awful. A lot of people will see it that way. The way it was read in 1972, you may be right, which is, we're showing women having empowerment and agency over their sexuality. And I think that's something people forget, is that a lot of the idea of women even being sexual in 1972 was revolutionary. Like, what? Showing women interested in sex? Like, people forget that the Victorian times were still weighing heavily on people back then.
Well, and on top of that, also being in positions of responsibility in the military.
Nursing, you don't see any women doctors here. That's so there is
true.
A line. Yeah. But I think, that's fair, that it's definitely a 1972 version of 1954 or 53 or whenever we're supposed to be at this point. The announcement stuff over the theme song, the like, attention, tonight's movie will be The Glory Brigade, etc. That is definitely something they use in the movie. They will use it very differently in the TV show going forward, but it's something they carried over. All the songs, the diegetic songs that you hear in the background, the sort of like people singing mostly in Japanese, from what I could tell, those are all songs that were in the movie, so they licensed them over to use them on the TV show. And one other interesting fact here is that Jamie Farr, who will go on to play Klinger, make his role famous as Klinger, is the announcer. He's just the voice of the announcer so far at this point.
That's interesting. I wonder if they throw enough at you right out of the gates that, especially I'm coming from it from the perspective of somebody who's never seen the entire movie. So I didn't even know that it was a condensed version of the movie. Like except for it doesn't matter. We'll eventually get to the movie. Man, oh man, is that just LA? You could literally see the broadcast antennas in the back over those hills.
I have read that a lot of Koreans look at MASH and go, that looks more like Vietnam than Korea. And, of course, it was shot up the hills above Malibu. You can go visit the set. So, yeah, it's very clearly not Korea. But again, in 1972, how many people in the audience were going to be able to point that out? Probably not that many of them. You also don't have Father Mulcahy yet. It's a different actor for the pilot. He's only in the pilot. That's the chaplain. He will be replaced. Gary Berghoff, who plays Radar, is the only member of the cast of the movie that will carry over throughout the entire series. Although G. Wood, who plays the colonel, or is he general? Is general, who they bring over from, he comes back to the MASH unit.
Yeah, because he's smitten with the idea of...
Yeah. And he's the one who's going to arrest Hawkeye and Trapper. He was in the movie playing that same role, but he's only going to be in 3 more episodes and then he's out. So we'll never see him again.
Man, by the way, boy, do those victims know how to bleed in a courteous manner. Just a little gentle dusting on the hands of the surgeon, and that's it. Those whites are whiter than white.
And
Those
that's
clothes are
it.
clean as can be. I thought
For
about that.
primetime TV, it's probably pushing it to show it at all, right?
And it's like you couldn't have none. You had to imply, but it's like, I don't know, is his hands just a little bit dirty or what have you?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is, as a kid, never noticed it. Never noticed it. Never thought about it.
MASH was kind of famous because the blood shows up more often as time goes on, and it was pretty famous for being what was considered gory for primetime TV at the time.
Yeah.
I found Colonel McIntyre and Frank Burns to be way more comedic on TV than the rest of the cast, who are still trying to be a little more of that serious drama that you're talking about.
I don't know, man. Alan Alda laid it on so thick with his eyebrow wiggling. Thick, yeah. I was waiting for they even do a couple of wacky sound effects. Like, now, granted, when he's holding it still and there is a spiral condenser coil, so I guess there's a reason why it would go doing. but that was like Jim Carrey the Mask level
Really,
cartoonist.
Yeah. And then we get a bunch of characters who are from the movie who will not carry on. Lieutenant Dish, the woman who is being, a date with her is part of the auction. She'll be in a couple more episodes and we'll never see her again. There's a lot of uncredited roles that are there, but you'll never see them again. It is very much like an airlock between the movie and what will become known as MASH, the TV series that most people know about.
Ryan in the chat was saying that Alda grew up in vaudeville, which, boy, does that show, like, out of nowhere. Like, again, the simple 1, 2, 3 beats, and it's like the very framing let me know it's like, oh, he's going to be in the Foot Locker. Oh, he's going to be naked in the shower next to her, or implied naked, or what have you. Like all of that felt like it was almost, it felt very intentional. It was like, it was an inoculation where it's like, we're going to give you cartoonish, distracting, over the top physical beats of comedy, but that is so you won't get tricked into thinking this is serious.
Yeah. The only other note that I had is Hojan is the first of our Korean characters who is portrayed by someone who's not Korean. The actor was Filipino.
Also, zero accent. No, how amazing that they went to Korea and they found somebody who speaks like a native Southern Californian.
What a shock. So I'll keep track of that in the other 3 episodes that we watch. But I've seen this a million times, honestly, because I'm such a fan of MASH. I've not seen a lot of the other episodes we're going to watch all that often. So it's well-trodden ground for me, as you might have guessed, just listening to us. I'm curious what other observations or thoughts you have watching this for the first time.
It was a lot of fun to watch it with production vision turned on. Noticing the lighting, trying to figure out what was the sound stage, and they also had to do a tremendous amount of heavy lifting to introduce people to the MASH world. There's a fairly large cast of characters for a half-hour comedy. The laugh track felt to me just like it's kind of like you go to a theme park and there are certain effects that have to happen, because like they have a thing that explodes this way, and so you write every script to wedge that in. That's what the laugh track felt like to me. Unfortunately, the parts I remember as a kid watching, I remember getting really swept up into stories, and the characters seemed very real and alive to me. I got zero of that. Everyone is a paper-thin cardboard cutout of a character, but number one, they're getting their sea legs underneath them. Number two, they kind of need to start off that way to stop anybody from feeling anything about the horrors of war in the middle of Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam is still technically underway. There is no end of the war yet when this airs in September 1972. And they do what TV adaptations of movies are going to do for decades to come after it, which is try to be the movie in the pilot. And that's really difficult. And I think does not lend itself well to this plot where they're trying to encompass too many characters, like you said, and trying to boil down the best bits of the movie people watched and liked so that people who haven't seen the movie will also like it. And it just rarely ever works very well.
Well, and part of there are cases where people have been able to wildly go sideways and have it pay off. But in general, if somebody is watching the show because they like the movie, they'd appreciate it if the show looked something like the movie. But you know, how much? Because if you do it too much, then it's like, well, why did you even bother to make it? You didn't change anything. Otherwise, it's you changed so much, I don't even recognize it.
The biggest problem when you make a movie into a TV show at the beginning is people saying, well, that's not Dolly Parton in this TV dramatization of 9 to 5.
9 to 5.
Right? Like, so it is funny to think that when you and I were introduced to Alan Alda's Hawkeye long before Donald Sutherland's Hawkeye, but at the time this aired, anybody who knew Hawkeye at all only knew Donald Sutherland's interpretation of it. So they are going to need to take time to make these characters into their own.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, gentlemen,
Anthony,
I have a couple things that I noticed.
You have served in Korea, not in a MASH unit, but I'm interested in your perspective on this.
First of all, it didn't look anything like any Korea that I've ever seen. And I've seen most of the country, just from touring and the fast trains and stuff. But do you know why they tell you to duck under the helicopter blades?
So you don't get your head cut off?
No.
Okay, no, that's what I would have guessed.
Is it because the sound?
No, it's the debris. The taller you are, the more of a profile you have that can get whipped around, so you'll be unstable, and the debris that it blows up from the ground is more likely to hit you in the face if you're taller, because it comes up higher.
Interesting,
crazy.
Yeah. So one of those things that when I see in war movies and stuff like that, I'm always like, most people think they don't want to get their heads cut off. No, that's not it at all. It's the debris. What's his name? Not Hawkeye, the other dude.
Trapper.
BJ Trapper.
Trapper gets a letter in the beginning that sets the location, the year, adds to the story, and gives his backstory all within 4 lines of dialogue. And I thought that was awesome because it wasn't this long example of
also those 4 lines of dialogue were very simple: setup, punchline. Yeah. So you may have seen them come and go and not even noticed them, but your brain did.
Bad news for my wife. She still loves me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it sets you the time frame and the location. It does all that really, really quickly and gets it right out of the way, and you get moving on with the show for anybody that hadn't, they didn't have a clue. And also, holy racism, Batman. I did not expect that. I expected the misogyny. I did not.
Oh, you talking about the character named Spear Chucker?
Yes.
That's the character's name in the movie. And in the movie, they have a lengthy explanation of why he chooses to go by that. Which you don't get in this episode of television, which makes it very, very, very odd.
Well, I mean, and plus also, like, look, if we're going to give the show grace enough to set it in 1972, the production of it about the 1950s, then we also have to give enough grace to assume that they didn't do it out of hostility because they were obligated to have an African-American character on the show.
No, it's a great scene in the movie, and I won't try to explain it. If you want to see the movie, go see the movie. But it's really interesting, and I think a very, very like well done scene in the TV show. They're just like, hey,
you won't even say it.
Yeah, they just toss it and then just keep going. I was like, wait,
what? Drive on by. Yeah,
like it just felt like there was a lot of stuff in this episode that was just it was laid out there and just passed right through, and then you just kept watching the show, and it was really enjoyable, and I really enjoyed it. This is the first time I've actually enjoyed watching an episode of MASH.
Interesting. What was your experience with MASH before this? Like, just catching it every once in a while?
Being forced to watch it because Grandpa only had one TV.
Okay. And it was the only thing on.
Grandpa's TV was what Grandpa's channel,
So when we get to the lowest ranked episode, you'll be like, this is what I've seen.
That's the MASH I know.
Yep, probably.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you, Amos. Appreciate that. Any other thoughts on MASH from either one of you? Season 1, episode 1, pilot.
Yeah, not really. Although I did find it very weird that I mean, I guess it was cute at the time to kind of in character have the announcements read the cast for the credits. That was a lot of real estate. That was a full minute out of the 27 that you had.
They're not going to do that again.
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to remember. I think they do that at the end of the movie too, but it makes more sense in a movie where you've spent a couple hours and these are the credits that are going to roll anyway.
Also, I watched this on the Disney Plus app. I didn't see any warnings about context and setting going into this MASH.
Interesting. No one's noticed is what that tells me. All right, so next is the ultimate. We go right into the highest ranked episode of MASH, which is from season 3, episode 24, Abyssinia, Henry. So we met Colonel McIntyre, who runs the MASH unit, and I don't think it's too much of a spoiler from the title there to say, sounds like Henry will be leaving. And that is one of the realities of a MASH unit, and it's in the book even. People come and go. People, their tour of duty, because they're drafted, ends, and they're released and they're sent home. So that's what we'll be dealing with, and it's the first major cast change of MASH. Three seasons in, you get a major cast change. And MASH famously will only really keep Hawkeye and Klinger. If you count Klinger because he did the announcements, they're the only ones that go all the way from the beginning to the end.
That's right. That's right. The sidekick to Hawkeye, I said BJ, but that's the name later.
Yeah, BJ replaces Trapper.
That's what it was. Okay.
And Radar will stay most of the way through, although I think he leaves temporarily and comes back, if I remember right, Gary Berghoff. It'll be the first major cast change, the highest ranked episode, season 3, episode 24, Abyssinia, Henry, for the next episode of the full experience. You get these episodes early, and you get to weigh in on what we watch if you're a patron. Become a patron at patreon.com/Cordkillers. We'll see you next time for the ultimate episode. Hot Lips stays all the way to the end. What am I talking about? I can't believe that. I forgot that. Put this in.
Yeah, see, now we did it. We found the real misogynist.
I didn't even call her Major Houlihan. My commission.